I have been with the organization for about 20 years. I have been the executive director of American River Conservancy since the beginning of 2019. And so it's been a whirlwind of 5 years since then. We've gone through a lot, and the world has changed since 2019 a little bit. And so I'm not here to talk about my musician, my band, but if you want to talk about that later, I'll let you know more details about that. But I do want to mention that the reason why, one of the reasons why I became involved with American River Conservancy actually is because of music. And it's actually a fun story. I was actually teaching lessons about 20 years ago, teaching violin and piano lessons in the community, and I stumbled across, one of my first students was Alan Ergott's son, and I was teaching him violin, and we got to talking about red-legged frogs, and we got to talking about the land, and what I was studying in school at the time happened to be environmental biology. So, the rest is history. After that, I became an intern. I worked with Judy Johnson for many years, and so it's been a wonderful career, and I'm looking forward to continuing that. And I'm really humbled and honored to be able to continue the vision of the people that started the American River Conservancy 35 years ago. So I have our mission statement up here. Our mission is to protect healthy ecosystems in the Upper American River and Upper Cosumnes River watersheds through conservation, education, and stewardship. And I'll kind of walk you through what education is to American River Conservancy, what conservation means, and also what stewardship means. So watershed conservation is essentially the protection of wildlife habitat, open space, agricultural lands, recreational resources, cultural resources. We do this through land purchases. We work with willing sellers. We receive donations of land from folks in our watersheds, and we also purchase or accept donations of conservation easements. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. Land stewardship. So this is very simply taking care of the land, managing land. We do habitat restoration. We do water quality monitoring in our waters on the Cosumnes River. We also do a lot of trail maintenance. We manage trails for public access. And then environmental education, last but definitely not least. We do facilitate and provide educational programs to the community for people of all ages. And our goal with environmental education is always to connect people with their environment and also remind them that we are a part of the environment, we're a part of nature, and as such, we need to take care of it. So in the 35 years we've been around, we've done quite a bit. We just surpassed the 30,000 acre protected milestone, which I'm really proud to be a part of. We've protected those lands mostly within El Dorado County, but we've done some work in Placer County as well. So the Upper American River watershed extends into Placer County and El Dorado County, and then we also work in the Upper Cosumnes River Basin. We've provided over 35 miles of recreational trails to the public, and that's in partnership with several agencies we work with. We've delivered environmental education programs to over 34,000 people of all ages. And then we've restored over 1,800 acres of lands in these watersheds. So ARC's origin story is a really unique one, and I had the pleasure of recently interviewing Alan and Cindy Ergott. There's a little article in the newsletter about it, but we kind of reminisced about how ARC got started. And really, it was a grassroots effort of people in the community, like-minded. Many of them were young families, people who had maybe just moved here, or some people who have lived here for a long time, and they felt this strong connection with the river, and specifically the South Fork American River. And I don't know how many of you have been to the South Fork American River. You can raise your hand if you, all right, hopefully everybody in this room has been to the South Fork. But it is an iconic river, and it's also one of the most popular whitewater destinations in the world. People from all over the world come here to boat its waters. And so this love of recreation, this love of the river, and then all of a sudden, this is 1988, 1989, there's a lot of development happening in El Dorado County, a lot of houses being built, a lot of roads going in that weren't there before, and so there was this need to kind of do something about that and save these places that they thought maybe wouldn't be the same again, or maybe there wouldn't be access to them ever. And so that is how American River Conservancy began, in people's living rooms as meetings, and that's really how I think all great things start. It starts really small and then becomes something bigger and more successful as time goes on. And I love this quote. It says, "In the end, we will protect only what we love. We will love only what we understand. And we understand only what we're taught." And so that is really, in essence, why we have this kind of three-pronged approach to what we do as a land trust. It's the conservation, protecting it, and stewardship, taking care of it, but also the education piece. That's how we build that understanding and that connection to place. And so there are so many beautiful pictures. I have to add slides with pictures. But this is the iconic landscape. This is Poppy Hill on the South Fork American River. There's a photo, I think this is a historic photo Mark Leader Adams took of boaters going down the South Fork. And then this actually is on the Cosumnes River, the main stem Cosumnes River near the county line, Amador, El Dorado County line. Beautiful spot. So we've protected over 30,000 acres, and we're working on, right now I've got a queue of about 10,000 additional acres that need protection because, there are interested people that want to see their land protected for future generations, or there are agencies that want to see land protected for wildlife habitat. But these are just some of the projects that we've completed in the last 35 years. Maybe by a show of hands, how many have been to Cronin Ranch Regional Trails Park? All right. So that's an ARC project. That project started in, I want to say, probably began in the early 1990s, the discussions with the landowners, working on that project, talking to the BLM, talking to the funders, and then finally in 2004, 2005, Cronin Ranch became open to the public for trail access. And it's currently owned and managed by the Bureau of Land Management, which is a federal agency. And next door to Cronin Ranch trail system is Magnolia Ranch. That's also another project that we had a hand in. And all the way down to Salmon Falls. We have Acorn Creek Trailhead on our Salmon Falls Ranch holding. That's about 757 acres. That is open to the public. We manage that right now. And so if you ever have a chance to go out that way, that's a beautiful trail system as well. And it's all connected. It's all connected along the South Fork American River as part of that trail system. We recently protected a ranch called a portion of a ranch, which I'll talk a little bit more about, El Dorado Ranch. It's on the Cosumnes River. And then also Wakamatsu Farm, as Keith mentioned, a little bit more about that. Oh, sorry, this text is very small, I apologize. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what we accomplished just last year. In 2023, we protected 1,025 acres at El Dorado Ranch. We monitored 18 different river sites on the Cosumnes River. We created about 1.5 miles of new trail at Acorn Creek or Salmon Falls Ranch. And then we also restored just under 200 acres of forest habitat at the American River headwaters. And we also delivered 100 education programs and educated over 2,700 students of all ages. And our amazing volunteers, including Keith over here, and maybe a couple of other folks in the room, have donated over 7,000 hours, and that is phenomenal. I always like to look at it and like, how many staff would I have had to hire to fill in that gap? About 4 full-time staff is the answer, so that's pretty phenomenal. And we leveraged over $6 million in grant funds. So for a little nonprofit based in Coloma in the state park, I feel like we accomplished a lot last year. So we've had to adapt over time. Our mission has evolved and changed with what funding is available, what our community needs are, and really how the environment is changing, because the environment is always changing. We're dealing with climate change, we're dealing with wildfire, we're dealing with the need for more trails from our community. As more people move to the area, there's a greater need for recreational spaces. And so all of these things make up what American River Conservancy is as an organization. Everything from cultural resource stewardship, so taking care of historical sites, maybe taking care of important tribal lands and giving those back to the native people that live here. Working with different agencies to support habitat restoration projects. Operating a working farm and working with farmers to provide organic food to our community. So those are all things that we do as a land trust. So I really love maps. If you didn't know me, one of my first jobs at the Conservancy was actually to help create maps for the organization using a program called GIS, and it's just a cartography tool that's on the computer. And so it's a really fun way to kind of visualize your environment and also be a little creative and artistic at the same time. So this is a big map. This big blob here is the combined watersheds. This is the American River watershed, which is much larger than the Cosumnes. And then this one down here, this is the Cosumnes River watershed. And when I say watershed, a lot of people may not know what that term means, but it essentially means all the land that drains into that river system. So we all live in a watershed. Basically, it's, anything you do on your land, maybe you don't live near a creek or a stream, but when it rains, all that water flows downhill into a creek or a stream. And so anything you do on your property impacts what happens downstream. So you'll notice that our boundary goes basically to the crest of the Sierra. So it does not contain the Lake Tahoe Basin. That's a different watershed. But the American River watershed is very different from the Cosumnes River watershed. The Cosumnes River is our last, on the western slope of the Sierra, it's the last undammed river system. And we have, part of our mission, a big part of our mission is to protect that river and make sure that it remains free-flowing. The American River, by contrast, has about 17 dams on it. Most of those are hydroelectric facilities that provide power, but they also provide flood protection and water. They're a water source for millions of Californians. And the South Fork American River is no exception. That has several dams on it. So there's Chili Bar, there's Slab Creek Reservoir, Union Valley. All of these you probably have, if you've lived here for a long time, you probably have visited all of those at one point. So all of the kind of salmon or pink colored parcels are properties that American River Conservancy has conserved over the years. and all the way up to the headwaters of the Middle Fork American River and the headwaters of the North Fork Cosumnes River down to the confluence with Folsom Lake down here. This is our Salmon Falls Ranch area, and also along the main stem Cosumnes River. I'll talk a little bit more about those properties in El Dorado Ranch. Also, if people have questions, I'm totally open to you asking a question if it pops into your head during my presentation. We don't have to wait till the end. Yeah.
I just missed something. You said something about it being, the American River being wild?
Well,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, so she asked she wondered if I said the American River is a wild river. So yes, there are sections of the American River that are considered wild and scenic. So particularly the North Fork American River actually has wild and scenic designation above the dams. So there are some dams below. But the American River on a whole, as a watershed, has many dams on it. It has about 17 dams. The Cosumnes River is wild and relatively free-flowing. I say relatively free-flowing because it still has diversion dams on it. It has a diversion dam on Camp Creek that takes water to Jenkinson Lake or Sly Park Lake.
One more question.
Yeah.
What is the source of the American River?
The source of the South Fork American River, the headwaters, is actually up near Echo Summit. So there's a meadow up there and a lake called Audrain Lake, Audrain Meadow. That's basically the headwaters of the South Fork American River. So it starts way up high in the mountains. I've never been to the actual bubbling spring that is the headwaters of the South Fork American River, but I'm sure there is something up there like that. But basically, the crest of the Sierra at Echo Summit is the headwaters, yeah. Yeah. Oh. Oh, I can certainly email maybe Mark a copy of it, and you can distribute it. I'd be happy to, yeah.
I will put it in the newsletter.
Great, thanks. Yeah, question?
Are you part of the TNC, or how do you coordinate with them at all?
Yeah, so we are a partner with the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is also a land trust. So they're global though. So they have offices probably on every continent, maybe not Antarctica, but their offices all over the world, and so they're much bigger. We're very much local, so we're very local to the American and the Cosumnes River watersheds. But we do work with them. They're folks that are kind of focused on forest restoration and Sierra forest health. We're working with them on the French Meadows Partnership, which is in this area in Placer County, and I have several slides that talk about that partnership and how we're working together with TNC and other partners.
Well, it's just a partnership, you're not a subsidiary.
No, we're a completely separate organization. Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how conservation, watershed conservation, benefits us all as humans, but also as parts of the ecosystem, right? Our job as conservationists is to protect and maintain clean air and water for all life. Wildlife habitat connectivity, so animals need to move around on the landscape to find food, to mate, to go to higher elevations during certain times of the year. And so we make sure that there's enough space for them to move around and it's connected. Endangered species habitat. We have worked on projects to protect endangered species of frogs. So the California red-legged frog was one example. We also have worked on projects in Cameron Park to protect habitat for the rare plants there that only exist in that soil type. We also protect land to provide spaces for people to recreate, so trails. Also, open space and green belts. It's really nice as you're driving down 49 to look out your window and see a bunch of oak trees and a bunch of green on the ground right now. And so, scenic beauty is a part of that, why we protect land. Agricultural land, a few years ago, well, it's been almost 14 years now, we protected one of the first farms that a working farm site. And so we believe it's important to protect agricultural land as well, to provide food for people. And cultural and historic resources, those are a part of the landscape as well. So everything from bedrock mortar sites, so Indian grinding rocks, to a historic site that was the first Japanese colony site in North America, which I'll talk a little bit more about at Wakamatsu Farm. And it's just, I think for me, protecting the land is also kind of takes on a little bit of a spiritual aspect too. I think it's really important for us as humans to connect to the place we live in a more sacred way, to then just say, oh, we're protecting that for trails, which is important, but I think there's also some inherent spiritual and these beautiful places. We don't want them to be lost. And it's our home. I think it's really, for me, and talking about other land trusts and like TNC that works on a much broader scale, maybe those folks who are at the San Francisco office of TNC, they're working really hard to protect spaces that are really important too. But I think what makes us a little bit different is that we're living and working in the place that we're protecting, and it's oftentimes our home. We're embedded in the community, and we have a vested interest, I think, as an organization to protect these places because we love them. And we work with lots of different partners to do that. Landowners, I put at the very top in bold text because they are our number one partner. We would not be able to do any of the work we do protecting land if we didn't have willing landowners to work with. And so these are folks who maybe they've had a family ranch for generations and have been grazing cattle out there for 60 years. And their sons and daughters don't want to take over the family ranch business. Oftentimes they'll call us and say, look, we love our property, we have to sell it because we're getting old, but it breaks our heart to see it maybe split up and turned into a subdivision. So that's when we come in and we work with them. Or maybe, it's somebody who just has too much land, they don't want to take care of it anymore, and they see the value in protecting it. And so we work with them. We work with them in a variety of ways. Sometimes we have folks who are very, very generous and just want to donate their land and make sure it's protected. And we work with them for that as well. We also work with a variety of funders, state agencies, federal agencies, private foundations. And we also have a huge community of supporters, and most of whom live in El Dorado County, who provide funding for us to do what we do. We also work with tribal partners. This is something that we've been, kind of 2015, 2014, we started working with some of the local tribes in the area to identify some of our lands that were important for them culturally. And so I'll tell you a little bit more of a good story on one of our projects in that regard. We also work with what I put NGOs, so that's other non-governmental organizations or nonprofits like TNC or UC Davis or other land trusts. We also work with Placer Land Trust and Sacramento Valley Conservancy, which are other local land trusts in our region. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about these terms that I might be throwing around, which are fee title and conservation easement, which are kind of land trust lingo or real estate terms. But basically, when I talk about land conservation, I'm talking about acquiring land. And so we can acquire land in a number of ways. We can acquire land in fee, which is just outright purchasing of land or accepting a donation of a property or parcel in fee. And that's like, when you go and buy a house, you buy the land and the house in fee. You own it outright. Then there's conservation easements. Conservation easements are basically, you can kind of think of land as a bundle of rights, like a bundle of sticks, right? You have the right to subdivide and develop your property. You have the right to maybe mine for minerals. You have the right to develop water or, graze your cows. All these rights add up to what you own as a landowner. And so as a land trust, we can craft these legal documents that say, okay, landowner, you want to work with us, but you still want to own your land, but you want to protect it from development in the future. So we'll buy a conservation easement from you, which essentially means that the land trust has come in and purchased the subdivision and development rights from the landowner. And that landowner can no longer subdivide, develop the property. Maybe they can't build new roads or cut down certain species of trees, or maybe they can't do certain types of agriculture on their property. But that has a value, and those conservation easements actually run with the land, in essence. They last forever, and so the next person who owns the property has to abide by the terms of that conservation easement, so it becomes protected forever, but it remains private land. So I just wanted to talk about some of our most recent conservation projects. Lewis Ranch is one that I'm really proud of because I kind of saw this one from the beginning to the end. I got to complete it. It was one of my first projects that I completed on my own, so I graduated. And this one was particularly exciting because it's beautiful. Number one, you can see from these photos, but it's on Greenwood Creek, which is a major tributary to the South Fork American River, and it has excellent habitat for all kinds of wildlife. I'm a little bit of an amphibian buff. I love frogs and salamanders and toads. So it has a lot of aquatic habitat, so it's just kind of like a frog girl dream. But it's just beautiful, and there's also these lovely oak woodlands on the landscape. And if you have the opportunity, I think we're going to be having some hikes out there this spring, so keep an eye on our events calendar. But in the springtime, in April and May, the wildflower display is just gorgeous out there. So we worked with a private landowner on this one. His name was Francis Lewis in his 80s. He wanted to protect his property. And so we worked with him and his son to purchase the property. We raised about almost $4.5 million. And we were able to close escrow in 2022 to protect that, and almost 1,000 acres. It's a beautiful spot. This one I talked a little bit about before. This is El Dorado Ranch. This is on the main stem Cosumnes River. So just as you're going south on Highway 49 down the town of El Dorado, it's probably, as the crow flies, maybe about 4 miles from here where we're standing. And actually, we are in the Cosumnes River watershed right now. So this represents 4 phases of acquisitions over the course of the last 12 years. We've acquired about 4,180 acres, and we are on track to protect another almost 3,000 acres in our 5th and final phase of acquisition. We're going big for the last phase. We're going to have to raise about $14 million in the next few years. So it's very ambitious, but I think we can do it.
Excuse me, your phone's ringing again.
And so one of the great things about this property is not only it has river frontage, but it has extensive blue oak woodland, which is really important. It's one of the habitat types in California that is kind of seeing the most loss. Blue oaks are endemic to California, which means they only exist in California. They only live in California. So it's important for us to protect these landscapes. The Cosumnes River, as I mentioned, is a wild river. It's a free-flowing river, so we do have wild Chinook salmon that come up the river and spawn in the Cosumnes River. And eventually, once we acquire all the phases of the property, it will become El Dorado County's first state wildlife area, and it will be managed by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and will have public access. We're actually in the process right now of planning a trailhead and trail off of Highway 49 that people will be able to access. So we're working through permits and environmental stuff right now. It is also a working landscape. It's a working cattle ranch, and it's been ranched for probably the last at least 100 years or more. And the current stewards that we're working with who are grazing their cattle out there, the Nielsen family, have been out there for at least 50 years. And they know this ranch like the back of their hands, and they still work it on horses. So they're out there on horses most days, moving cows around. And it's just a gorgeous landscape. These pictures don't even do it justice. We'll also be doing a series of hikes. We've already started registration for these hikes. They're kind of sneak peek first looks at phase 5 of El Dorado Ranch. And we're kind of launching a campaign to raise funds for this acquisition. So, I wanted to also talk about this important conservation project that spans many years, but it's very important to mention. And I neglected to acknowledge in the beginning of my presentation that we are currently standing on Miwok land. This is the ancestral homeland of the Miwok people. The Nisenan people were also in this area as well. So I also, and not just were, they still are. We still have Nisenan, Miwok tribal members that live and work in our communities, and we're working with them. This story about Ladies Valley is important because it represents to me where I feel like we can be going with land conservation in terms of protecting land not only for wildlife habitat, but also for cultural practices to continue and these cultures to kind of revive and come back and also provide some reconciliation for what happened during the gold rush. It was a horrible time for Native people during the gold rush, and so I love being a part of projects like this that bring in so many different partners. But we protected this land in 2008. It's 320 acres. It's on the North Fork Cosumnes River. Again, not too far from here, just right off Oak Hill Road. And what struck me and Alan about this property in the beginning when we started working on this was that this part of the river was different than other parts. Upstream, you have these big boulders and canyons, and it's very dramatic, but the river's flowing really fast, and it's not really safe to swim in it. And this site, the river spreads out. It's a valley, and it's a floodplain, and there's all kinds of botanical diversity and lots of wildlife. And then, lo and behold, one day we were walking by the river, and we come across this rock with lots of holes in it, and that is, indicative of people being on the landscape for thousands of years. These holes are probably about 8 inches deep, which indicates that people were here for a long time. And these, bedrock mortars are also called grinding rocks, but they're used to grind up acorns mostly, but also other plant materials for food. But lots of significance in terms of cultural resources. So we brought in our good friend Kimberly Petrie, who's a Nisenan and Miwok tribal member, and invited her to the site and said, look, this property obviously belongs with your people. What can we do? What can we do to facilitate that? How can we move forward with involving tribal members in this project? And so that was probably in 2011 or 12, I don't even remember how long ago it was. But fast forward to the last few years, and we are transferring that property to the tribe through a nonprofit, a native land trust that they created called Cosumnes Culture and Waterways. So that land will be able to stay with the native people of this area, and they will be able to use it for their cultural practices and do traditional ecological management on the land, hopefully bringing back some cultural burning and utilization of materials, plant materials for different material culture, making baskets, there's all kinds of things, making, foraging for native foods. So that's a really fun project. I'm really proud of it. This is a map. Again, maybe not, well, doesn't look like much to you, it's just a bunch of trees, but this is the river. It's a big section of river that flows through here. And the property spans on both sides of the river.
Elena?
Yeah.
Is there any discussion about the historical presence of beavers up in that country, and if there's anybody looking at possibly reestablishing beaver populations?
It's a really good question. We'd like to get beavers established in the upper watershed, because this would be an excellent habitat for beavers. There's tons of food. There's tons of willows and cottonwood. I think it would be a great spot.
Do the native peoples have a tradition of beavers up in there?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know that there's a lot of native traditions and stories surrounding beaver in many, many California Indian culture. But this specific area, I don't know. A lot of that knowledge was unfortunately lost. We're in the heart of the gold country, so a lot of that tradition, that oral history, didn't unfortunately get passed down a lot. So that's a really good question. I don't know, but I'm sure that there was. The beavers were here in the Sierra, and they're an important food source in other parts of the United States, and where beavers exist, where their distribution is there. And you mentioned beavers. I'll talk a little bit more about their importance in a few minutes. So the Sierra Nevada is where we are. We're in the Sierra Nevada foothills right now. But as you go up in elevation to the mountains, you get into this conifer forest, and you see the snowpack. And essentially, all that snow in the mountains, you probably know, is our biggest reservoir, the biggest natural reservoir in California. And 2/3 of California gets its water from the Sierra Nevada. There's 17 rivers that flow from that mountain range. And not only surface water, but groundwater that flows in our aquifers. That sounded like my phone. I was like, wait, I turned it off. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a project that kind of transcends conservation and moves into the stewardship realm, which is this act of taking care of the land. And this is the American River Headwaters Project. And this one represents ARC's largest acquisition, 10,115 acres. We completed this in 2015. The acquisition was completed in 2015. It's at the headwaters of the North and the Middle Forks of the American River, and it's just adjacent to Granite Chief Wilderness. And it's also part of the 26,000 acre French Meadows Partnership, which is a landscape scale partnership that is working to do forest management, ecological forest management, and bring fire back on the landscape for management purposes. We've raised over $18 million for both the purchase and the restoration of these lands. The lands were previously owned by a timber investment corporation, and they were logged in the early 90s. There was a lot of plantation in the 10,000 acres that we purchased. And so we set to work restoring some of those acres, but also the uppermost 3,000 acres, we decided that those had characteristics that were good enough to call it wilderness. So we worked with the Tahoe National Forest, and we transferred those 3,000 acres to be appended to the Granite Chief Wilderness. So those are now part of that wilderness area, and I'm very proud to say that it was the single largest donation of land into wilderness since 1964, when the act was passed. This is a photo of our partnership. Many agencies and organizations involved in that, from Placer County and Placer County Water Agency, the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, as well as UC Merced are involved in that project. This is a map of the area showing all the fires that had kind of come into the area in previous years, which spurred this partnership and this desire to want to do active forest management. And as you can see, French Meadows Reservoir and Hellhole Reservoir, these two reservoirs that provide all of Placer County's water. And so it's really important, after seeing the devastating effects of the King Fire, it was really important for Placer County and Placer County Water Agency to do something in the upper watershed to protect their investments at those reservoirs. So we had to find shared interests. Normally, American River Conservancy wouldn't really be working with Placer County Water Agency. And at first, Placer County Water Agency, PCWA, was opposed to our acquisition project. They were actually writing letters against it. So we said, look, what can we do? Let's work together on this. And so we decided that we would form a partnership with all these different organizations and agencies and do ecological forest management to improve the forest. To say, look, we're not just gonna hold on to this land and let it sit there, and we're gonna actively manage it. That's what it needs. So we also wanted to advance research on the link between active forest management and water supply. So that was a really great research opportunity, and that's where UC Merced came in. So we did all this stuff. We created a plan. We started doing wetland and stream restoration. We decommissioned a bunch of roads. We created trails. And we have treated over 1,800 acres of forest to date, doing mechanical fuel reduction, so mastication, hand thinning, you name it. So here's some pictures of the 56 stream sites that were restored. There's Alan standing next to one of the damaged sites before restoration. We decommissioned about 41 miles of road. Old logging roads that were not being used, that were in essence contributing to some hydrological issues in the watershed. Oh, I had an animation I forgot about on this one. So there we go. So we have some before and after photos. So before thinning, after thinning, before, and then after. So our goal is to get greater spacing in between the trees so that if a fire but when a fire comes through, it's gonna lay down on the ground and not go into the canopy. So partnerships are really great because we all have different strengths. And so we can talk to our partners and say, hey, what do you know about this? Or hey, can you help with this? I know you're really good at doing CEQA or environmental compliance. So it just makes it a little more efficient, and everybody, more heads is better than just one. And we're able to attract more funding that way. So lots of different funders for this one. I'm not going to go through all of them, but lots of state investment in this project. A lot of bond money that went into this. So, stewardship, taking care of the land. How many of you out there manage acreage? All right. Yeah. Let's see. How many acres do you manage, Daniel? 11 acres. Imagine managing 14,000 acres. And that we're just small, you know, this is BLM and US Forest Service manage millions of acres, sure. But for a small little land trust of 12 staff, some of us are part-time, some of us are full-time, but essentially maybe 10 full-time equivalent people, that's a lot of acreage. We have a lot of volunteers, yes, but there's only so much you can do. So we try to write grants to do these projects to fund the management of the land. And you know, we do what we can with volunteers. So we have lots of volunteer opportunities for helping with stewardship and land management activities. Everything from water quality monitoring, to meadow restoration, to trail maintenance, and we even have a bluebird nest box monitoring program. We have a great program called the Land Steward program that trains people, just like you, to go out on the land and monitor different areas. And it's kind of like a secret hiking club too, because you get access to some properties that maybe you didn't have access to before. But we need all the eyes and ears on the ground that we can get, because you know, our staff can't do it all. But stewardship really is, I mean, conservation's kind of like the really sexy part of what we do, I guess, I don't know. But like stewardship is like the grit, you know, that's like the hard work. It's the work of forever. You gotta take care of it. If you're gonna protect it, you have to take care of it. And so thinning trees, working with contractors to do road decommissioning. I never thought I would ever be working with contractors to cut down trees, but that's what we're doing, because that's what the forest needs right now before we reintroduce fire. Removing trash from the river. We are doing a meadow restoration project right now up at Lake Springs, which is the headwaters of the North Fork Cosumnes River. That's a really cool project that involves mimicking the impacts of beaver. As Pat was saying, you know, we don't have beaver in some of these meadows anymore to take down the willows and build little dams and slow down the flow of water. So we've got to do it ourselves. So this is a picture of that meadow. You can see this is a healthy part of the meadow where the stream is kind of meandering through. But there are sections of the meadow where we have lots of erosion happening because the water's just flowing by way too fast. And what we want it to do is sit in the meadow and stay there for longer on the ground and connect with the floodplain. So that's where our little human-created beaver dams come into play, where we can put pieces of willow along the stream, you know, perpendicular to the stream, stop the water, make little dams that maybe only last a year or two, and then they go away. But they help capture sediment and slow the water down. So this is a picture of a couple of our volunteers installing groundwater monitoring wells in the meadow. We've got to monitor the impacts of our projects. So we do have to install some instruments to measure the changes in hydrology. We also do a lot of recreational trail development. So this is a picture of a new trail that was built in the last couple of years called the Chaparral Ridge Trail at Salmon Falls Ranch. And trails are really important, I think, because they promote healthy communities. They get people out on the land and connecting to the landscape. And I think they increase tourism, and probably, I think you could argue that they enhance property value for surrounding property owners. So as I mentioned before, this is the Salmon Falls area. These are some new trails that we're putting in. This is really hard to see up here, I'm sorry. And then these are the design plans for our new trailhead on the Cosumnes River at El Dorado Ranch. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our environmental education program, which is so important for basically, it's connecting people to everything else that we're doing. It's connecting people to the land. It's connecting not just kids, but people of all ages. We have this, the California Naturalist Program, which I think we've been doing for about 8 years now. But I don't know, are any of you master gardeners? All right, yeah, we have a couple master gardeners back there. So it's very similar to the Master Gardeners Program. It's like a Master Naturalist certification. So you go through a certification course. It's a 40-hour course, kind of like an undergraduate college level course. And it's in partnership with the University of California, and we're one of the partner sites that teaches the course. And so our instructor brings subject matter experts from all over to talk about native plants. We have someone from UC Davis come and talk about insects. We have a geologist come and speak on that. So it's really a kind of wide spectrum of everything to do with natural history and environment, all rolled into one, and then you get a certification at the end as a naturalist. There's also field trips we do on properties that we own, especially Wakamatsu Farm. We have our summer nature camp, which I passed out some flyers. If you have any grandkids or maybe some neighbors who have kids who would be interested, I can give you some more information about our nature camp. But it's a really great way for kids to have fun exploring the river, doing fun activities that are led by our educators. My kids, I have 3 daughters, they went through nature camp every year they could, and they loved it. And I think they're better humans because of it. Hopefully, yeah. No, they are. I wanted to talk a little bit too about Wakamatsu Farm. Has anybody been to Wakamatsu Farm here? Oh, great. So maybe I'll just breeze through it. But you know, it's 272 acres. We purchased this site in 2010, and we purchased it from the Veerkamp family. And they had stewarded the property for 140 years prior. But before the Veerkamps owned it, it was actually settled by a group of Japanese colonists that came from Aizu Wakamatsu in Japan in 1869. And they formed a colony, and their goal was to try to, grow tea and raise silkworms and have a farm that specialized in kind of these Japanese products. Ultimately, it was not a very successful farm for many reasons, drought being one of them, but also I think just a lot of different factors played into that. It is the birthplace of the first Japanese American, and it's the resting place of the first Japanese woman to die and be buried in the United States. So Oke-san, her gravesite is on site. It's a really important pilgrimage site for a lot of Japanese American people and even people from Japan coming to the United States. We get a lot of visitors, international visitors. It's also on the California State Historic Landmark Registry, as well as the National Registry of Historic Places. And on top of all of that, it also has amazing oak woodland and riparian and aquatic habitats that provide, places for wildlife to live. And it is a working organic farm. So we have Fog Dog Farm grows produce on 10 acres at the site. They lease the site, a portion of it from us, and they live on site as well. We also do a lot of land stewardship at Wakamatsu Farm. This is a picture of us working with the Coyote crew from United Auburn Indian Community. So this was a cultural burn that we did in December. We've done other prescribed burns on site with CAL FIRE, but we're really trying to bring these natural processes back on the landscape because fire has been excluded from our landscape for so long, and the plants are adapted to it, and we need to bring it back. So we're excited about this project. We're getting started on creating an intertribal tending and gathering area on site so that local tribes, Shingle Springs, United Auburn, El Dorado Miwok, and others who want to participate can be a part of that and have a space to grow and tend and use these important cultural native plants. We're also finishing up, or we just finished up and got our occupancy permit for our education center at Wakamatsu Farm. This is an 1,800 square foot building that is kind of like an open air pavilion, but it'll allow us to host education programs in no matter what the weather is. And before, we didn't really have a space that could fit that many people. So we can fit a whole busload of kids in there and teach, even if it's pouring rain outside. And so phase 1 was completed back in November, and we're having a grand opening on March 1st. And we are also planning for phase 2. Phase 2 will include bathrooms, which are really an important amenity that our grant that we got for phase 1 would not fund. So we've got to fundraise from other places to get bathrooms. You know, it's an important part of managing land. You got to provide somewhere for people to go. So we're going to be including green technologies as well. So solar panels, it'll be completely off-grid, and then water catchment systems. So yeah. We also have a lot of things going on at the farm. It's kind of our hub for a lot of our activities. We do a lot of our field trips out there. And we have public programs and workshops. We have open farm days in the spring and the fall. But we're excited to be partnering with some local artists and an organization called Myrtle Tree Arts to have a really fun event on June 2nd. And there's more information in the newsletter about it. It's called Ripe Area. And it's a play on words, riparian. But we'll be throughout, I think we've already started doing workshops, or workshops are already planned up until June 2nd, and it'll culminate in a big event at Wakamatsu Farm that will it integrates art and science and the environment. So we'll have music. I think I'm going to be playing my violin with some folks, and there will be really neat displays on bioacoustics. So listening, bioacoustics is a study of sound in nature. And we'll have visual artists and people doing work with native foods or native plants, native crafts, so all kinds of things you can imagine. And so that's exciting, and I hope you'll join us for that. It's going to be a free event at the farm, so come on out. Mark your calendars. And lastly, I just wanted to say that if you are not already a supporter, please consider supporting what we're doing. Actually, this kind gentleman right here in the front row signed up to be a member today, so give him a round of applause. And that's the kind of thing that keeps us going. The funding we get from all these big grants, you see we got $6 million of grants. Well, that all goes to purchase the land. We have to raise funds from other sources to pay our staff and keep the lights on, pay for our computers and all that good stuff. So, becoming a member is it's an investment in your community and your environment, and so I really encourage you to be a part of it. Volunteer, come out, and you don't have to dig trails or do hard work putting up fences. You could work at the office with Keith mailing newsletters. That's one of the things that Keith volunteers, and it's a really fun social thing to do as well. So anyway, that's I think that's the end. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes?
Quick question. I'm wondering how you prioritize where to purchase. I'm thinking of my best friend. She and her husband are at a ranch just outside of Folsom.
Yeah.
It's actually on Latrobe Road.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 900 acres there. And an incredible big creek that spills, and a big pond. Huge pond, and it's got turtles and all kinds of things in it. Audubon Society comes out every year to do a bird count.
Oh, okay.
But they, like I said, the family's been there. It's been a family ranch for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, my friend and her husband, turning 80, could no longer afford to tax it. So they sold it under contract to Secaucus.
Oh, I know what property you're talking about.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful property. It's so close to Folsom.
Yeah.
It could be kept natural
Mm-hmm.
with all the birds and all of the things that are in the streams. It would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Ever
Well,
intense.
we're working with Secaucus to purchase other property. That's El Dorado Ranch.
Oh, good.
But I do have my eye on that property as well. So, but to answer your question about she asked, how do we prioritize what we protect? And so that's a really good question. We do have a conservation plan, like a strategic plan for how we go about doing that. That is out of date, and I'd like to update it soon. But we also have kind of like a rubric that we basically kind of score land projects as they come in on, well, what's the value? Is it how threatened is it by development, or is it under threat of being subdivided, or are the landowners 87 and they're just going to put it on the open market soon and it'll be lost, the opportunity will be lost. All those things kind of go into the decision-making process on what we work on, and including like funding, what funding is available, because that's usually the limiting factor is funding and how much there is available. Everything from if there's endangered species on site or different types of resources play into what ranking or what score it gets, including its connectivity. So if it's connected to other lands that are protected already, then it gets a higher score. But if it's sort of like a 40-acre parcel in the middle surrounded by residential properties, it would probably get a lower score, yeah.
But they could donate it to your.
They
so
could.
You could sell it.
We have had that happen. Yeah, we have worked with landowners in the past who exactly the same thing. They owned 80 acres, kind of this little island in the middle of a bunch of houses around it. And we said, well, we really can't get funding for that because there's not a lot of conservation value there. But, if you want to donate it to us, we can then sell it and maybe place some restrictions on the land, so only one house can be built on it or something. And then, we can use the proceeds from that sale to protect other more higher conservation value properties in the watershed. And we did that. And that's a really great model too. Any other questions? Wow. Oh, okay.
You talk about your group and when you can.
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, thank you for asking. You're really sweet. Yeah, so I do, as Keith mentioned, I play fiddle and sing in a local folk band. We also play old time music. It's called Hither and Yon. And we're playing at the Green Room Social Club in Placerville on Sunday at 4 to 6 p.m. So if you're interested, I could give you some more information. But yeah, you're welcome to come and.
They're really good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a little 3-piece ensemble that we have right now. So.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Oh, and back there. Yeah.
I was just curious, because all of these entities that you work with, do you ever work with Sierra Club?
Occasionally, we'll work with them on Sierra advocacy days, like Sierra Day at the Capitol, for advocating for policy and stuff like that. But I don't think we've worked on them with any specific projects. So, yeah, for restoration or land acquisitions. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
We have refreshments.